Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 24th of July, and joining me on this edition, our assistant editor Steve Withers.
This is the most uncomfortable coffin I've ever been in.
News editor Mark Hodgkinson.
Children. I love children.
And special guest star Mark Botwright.
You've surrounded yourself with a bunch of weirdos.
Unfortunately, Ed can't be with us this week because he was hit by lightning. He's fine, but his internet's not.
Fortunately.
Has he got superpowers?
No, I don't think so. Unless there's beer involved, I don't think so. No, it's lightning struck somewhere in Milton Keynes and knocked out the internet, so Ed's not with us for this week's podcast. And we've also lost two big Hollywood names this past week, unfortunately. So Martin Landau, first of all. Steve, I don't remember him in Space 1999 because that was a little bit before my time, kind of. I don't really remember that.
I was an avid fan of Space 1999. I think it started in 76, so it might have just been before Star Wars. And it had, for a show back in the 70s, really, really good effects. So for me, Martin Landau will always be Commander Koenig from Space 1999. Looking back now, of course, the effects I think still look pretty good, but obviously the fashions of that series with the giant flares and the platform boots was a very poor attempt to try and show what life would be like in 1999. Because I certainly don't remember wearing any flares or platform boots myself back in 99.
I'm sure also, they came back into fashion late 90s.
What, platform shoes and flares? Oh, baggy jeans didn't they?
Yeah,
they did. The whole Manchester thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the show. I mean, it was a stupid concept, wasn't it? The idea the moon got blasted out of Earth's orbit and then was travelling through space at presumably super faster than light speeds. And the second season was completely rehashed because they changed everything and brought in new characters and changed some of the designs and the clothing and stuff. But yeah, I loved the show at the time. It was a big influence on me as a sci-fi fan. And like I say, I mean, he'll always be Commander Koenig to me. I mean, I know he's done other things, of course, like Mission Impossible before that, but I wasn't really aware of that as a kid. And since then, of course, he's done, he won an Oscar, didn't he, for Ed Wood?
Yeah.
For playing Bela Lugosi.
That was a fantastic performance from him because he was Bela Lugosi, as far as anybody's concerned. The performance was spot on.
Yeah, also, in winning that Oscar, he also generated one of the best moments in the Academy Award ceremonies because they had the cameras on all the nominees. And normally, the way it goes is one person wins, the others all look gracious and sort of clap and saying congratulations to the person that won. Not Samuel L. Jackson, who was up for Best Supporting Actor for Pulp Fiction. You actually saw him go, shit, as he didn't win. So that was worth it as well, really, him winning the Academy Award just to see Samuel L. Jackson's face when he didn't win. Also, he's in the film Meteor, which I did see in the late 70s. Again, saw Space 1999. Knew him from that, went to see Meteor at cinema with Sean Connery, and in it is also Martin Landau. Terrible film, awful effects, and a hysterical performance from Landau, who's just so over the top, it's not funny. So yeah, that's my memories of Martin Landau.
Hysterical, but it's over the top, so it's not funny.
Hysterical as in not hysterical as in funny, hysterical as in hysteria, right. As in mad.
Okay.
So different definition of the word.
Okay. Anybody else?
I can't say. It was a face I recognised. I know the name. I was similarly too young to really know Space 1999. And beyond that, it just seemed to pop up in kind of the odd film and the odd TV show. I'm afraid it was kind of, largely went past me. But looking at his TV work, it looked like, he had some real kind of highlights throughout the kind of 60s and 70s, The Outer Limits, The Twilight Zone, Mission Impossible, Columbo, So, yeah, it's, I think I saw him also, he was in Without a Trace as one of the character's fathers and was kind of praised for the portrayal of Alzheimer's. So, yeah, beyond that, Ed Wood still is the one that I know him from.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember Space 1999, but I didn't really watch it. Ed Wood was a fantastic film, and as we said, he was superb as Bela Lugosi. But other than that, yeah, he was just one of those names you saw just pop up at the end credits, and I can't say I know him that well.
Okay, well, we'll move on to the other big name that we lost this week, which is George Romero. I'm going to go to Mr. Botwright first on this one.
Yeah, this is a sad one. It was funny when reading a lot of the kind of obituaries about Romero, I was trying to look for almost like the kind of genesis of the zombie film. And it really is tough to see anything before Night of the Living Dead that really has kind of the staple that he created in it. Before that, zombie movies largely seem to be solitary beings. There was a lot of stuff about voodoo and witchcraft and the idea of raising a kind of single person. But he really seemed to kind of plant this seed of the idea of it being shambling corpses, and it was the apocalypse. This was a kind of single massive event that was going to change the world. And Night of the Living Dead, there's so many kind of so many things in it which just became the blueprint, and in a strange way it almost limited the genre, because you just see the pushback against the idea of fast moving zombies. We take virtually everything that film did and put into place and assume that is what the zombie genre is. And it was it was a huge moment. It was a small movie. It was it's got shaky camera work and black and white, but such a kind of big impact. And for the time, 1968, having a black protagonist as well was very big. And the downbeat ending certainly seemed shocking at the time. And still today, you watch that ending and it's so harsh, it's so unflinching, it's so cold. I think it still stands up.
Yeah, I totally agree with Mark. I think Night of the Living Dead is. I think actually, if you look back on some old articles, you'll see that Chris McAneny wrote an article about the history of horror films, and he actually used 1968 as a breaking point. So it was before 68 and post 68, and the reason for that was Night of the Living Dead, which he considered to be such an important horror film that it changed the genre, not just the zombie genre, which you're right, Mark. It did go from being, sort of voodoo related, Caribbean related, or raising one person from the dead, to being this sort of apocalypse of the dead rising for some whatever reason and destroying the world. He felt that film, it wasn't just that; it was also things like its fairly realistic gore and violence, its tone, which you used to say is really dark and nihilistic, and also having a black protagonist as well, which at the time was incredibly rare, or almost unique, in fact. I think maybe the same year you had Sidney Poitier in The Heat of the Night, maybe, but it was very rare. And it totally changed the horror genre forever after that. And obviously also completely created what we would consider to be the modern zombie genre. So a very influential film, and he made plenty of great films after that too. I mean, not just in the zombie genre, although I think that Dawn of the Dead is a fantastic film and a brilliant satire on commercialism. And I did also enjoy Day of the Dead, even though it's not his greatest film, but certainly as a piece of in terms of its gore, it was very influential and very, very visceral and graphic at the time. Although these days things have moved on to the point now where mainstream television has stuff that's even gorier than anything he ever did. But yeah, his influence is strong. I really enjoyed his film Martin, which was kind of a vampire movie, but not quite a vampire movie. A very different take on it. He did a lot of interesting stuff, and he did Land of the Living Dead later in his career, which I also enjoyed. I thought that was a fun zombie movie. And he was an interesting filmmaker to the end, and he'll be greatly missed.
What you can't say is that he hasn't influenced a lot of the genre going forward. I mean, I'm just thinking about how many films have been based on the idea of zombies or zombie apocalypse or a virus going out like Rage and 28 Days Later, or there's just so many of them. I mean, and then you've got like the likes of The Walking Dead on TV. So just thinking of movies like that, there's loads of them. So he's had a huge influence in terms of that, and I guess it's one of these staples as well that producers and directors and studios keep coming back to as well. This idea of either a virus wiping out most people and turning others into zombies, or zombie-like creatures and so on. I mean, you can think of just so many films like that.
Yeah, he kind of single-handedly created an entire genre, didn't he? Really.
Certainly, his legacy is assured, and if you don't like kind of the zombie horror films, then just think that you wouldn't have things like Shaun of the Dead and the influence on Edgar Wright and kind of filmmakers like that who kind of took that idea of kind of slightly lo-fi filmmaking and just kind of creating your own vision, and it was something genuinely different. I mean, Dawn, certainly I agree with Steve, it is a phenomenal film. You can take it as a satire, you can take it as a social commentary. But I watched it, when I heard the news about Romero's passing, and I thought, well, I'll watch that again because it's, it is a film. We mentioned it the other day about. I think I said it was my favorite post-apocalyptic movie. But it's amazing to watch it, just how kind of oddly humorous it still is. The use of music right at the end it's these shambling corpses kind of going through a shopping mall, and it's you've got almost like Muzak in the background, and it's such a bizarre atmosphere to that, and you hold it. It's in stark contrast to Night of the Living Dead, which is kind of oppressive and it's claustrophobic, and Dawn of the Dead, it's got these bizarre little interludes. They're trapped in the shopping mall and they're trying to create some sense of normality. There's kind of have a romantic meal and kind of go shopping and this kind of thing. It's about kind of the consumerism of everyday life, and it also, I think it was one of the first to go with an uncut rating as well, which was kind of a huge gamble at the time. The idea that you would go for that rather than just accept the cuts and go with an R rating, and it became something of a kind of badge of honor for a subgenre. The idea that in fact the uncut rating would be what people actually look for. That it was a sign that you would get something that wasn't in other films.
Yep. So, really sad to lose two big names this week in Hollywood, and we need to move on now, but I'm sure we'll come back to some of their work in later podcasts. So moving on, Philips TV Tech Shootout, it's happening on the 3rd of August. We'd like you to come along and join us for this. Philips are going to be pitting two TV technologies together, and their head of TV technology and picture quality, Danny Tack, will be there as well, and he'll be giving a presentation into the different technologies that you'll see side by side. So it should be an interesting evening with like-minded people all getting together and talking TV tech, and plus you can meet Steve if that's your thing. So why not come along and join us? If you go to the homepage, you'll find the story in the top of the homepage. Click on that, find the email address, and apply to come along and see us. And the big thing here is that it's happening at BAFTA, which I've never been at BAFTA before. Have you, Steve?
I have not, so yes, I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, so it should be good. So if you want to come along to that, email in, because it closes on the 28th of July, so you've only got till Friday to get your emails in, so do that, and we'll hope to see you there. So let's move on to current competitions. Hodge is back. What can we win, Hodge?
You can win The Lost City of Z on Blu-ray, and that competition closes on the 27th of July. We've also still got the Scan Cedia S1 Nero Luxury Gaming Chair, not limited to gaming. It looks like a good office chair as well, and that closes on the 30th of August. We've also got what's called a Zerotech Dobby Mini Selfie Quadcopter, which I presume you're not limited to taking selfies with. You can just use it as a regular drone camera. That's courtesy of GearBest, and that competition closes on the 30th of August. And a little disclaimer, legal bit is all competitions are open to all eligible members living in the UK, Ireland and the Isle of Man.
Good stuff. I could see Steve entering this competition for the selfie thing. And previous competition winners?
We do. We've got Andrew JH009, and he won a copy of Logan on Blu-ray.
Okay, good stuff. Great film. I'm sure you'll enjoy that on Blu-ray. So let's move on to some hardware news. And interestingly, Harman International have acquired Arcam, Steve. This is a bit interesting because Harman themselves recently were acquired by Samsung.
Yes, it seems to be part of Samsung's plans to take over the entire audio world now that they're already a dominant player in the TV world. Didn't see this coming, I have to say. Obviously, as you say, Phil, Harman were bought by Samsung, I think was that last year? And towards the end of last year, and that was quite a big surprise in itself. But it shows that Samsung are very serious in terms of creating a bigger foothold in the audio market specifically, and we're talking about high-end audio as much as anything here. And I guess this is part of that plan. So buying Arcam, a British manufacturer that's traditionally been very much worn that British manufacturer badge on its sleeve. It'd be interesting to see how that changes now that it's going to be part of the Harman Group / part of Samsung. They've made some great products in the past. Arcam, certainly their most recent AVRs have been really impressive. They had the AVR 850 that we reviewed, which I was Dirac live as well in it. So it'll be interesting to see how this new development affects their product range going forward. I mean, they always say things like, it won't make any difference and we'll still be doing what we do, but that rarely is that actually the case in practice. We'll see what actually happens in terms of Arcam products. But it's certainly an interesting development, and it does show that behind the scenes, at least, Samsung's ambitions are quite significant.
Yeah, they've taken on quite a few brands in the Harman group, Mark. You put the story together. Just remind people who Harman own to start with.
They already own the Infinity brand, JBL, Harman Kardon, Lexicon, Mark Levinson, Revell, and of course now Arcam.
Yeah.
Oh, AKG as well, isn't it?
Oh yeah, AKG. You can't forget them. I've been using their headphones recently. Ed sent me some up for when I go walking and so on. Great. I hate any headphones or earphones, but I love these things. They're great. So that's quite a portfolio that they've got there. And I guess, Steve, looking at a portfolio like that, and you know the types of technology that you have within these different companies within the group, it could help Arcam, because Arcam have struggled in the past with their software development. You know, everything else has been top notch, but a lot of the time their actual software development and software implementation has let the side down when it's come to some products in the past.
Yeah, they've had some serious issues with previous generations of AVRs where their software development has been either late or very, very buggy. And that doesn't seem to have been the case so much with this new generation, things like the AVR 850, the 550, and I think the 250 that Ed reviewed. That they seem to be much more robust this time round. But I don't think obviously it will help. Having that kind of resources and research and development behind the scenes is definitely going to be a benefit for them. I mean, they'll go from being a small British manufacturer, relatively speaking, to being part of a much larger conglomerate, and hopefully there'll be economies of scale applied as well as more resources and research and development. So, I think in the long run, it's probably a positive thing. It'll be interesting to see whether they continue their relationship with Dirac, because I do think that was a real big selling point of the AVRs. And be interesting to see maybe if some of this stuff will filter into other products within the Harman Group, or possibly even within Samsung's range themselves. So I think overall it's a positive move, as long as you don't mind the idea of Samsung basically running everything.
Well, it's getting to that point where we're moving into a state where we've got massive companies controlling lots of things. I mean, you just have to look at the likes of Apple and Google and Amazon and stuff like that just to see how massive these companies are getting these days. But the other interesting thing there is, Samsung's own audio products. They're really taking it seriously. In the past, people have probably turned their noses up at LG TVs and Samsung TVs, and then obviously the product's gotten better and the performance got better, and now, they're the two top selling brands. And when it comes to audio, I know a lot of people on the forums in the past have maybe put their noses up at the likes of their sound bars and their speaker systems and so on from these companies like Samsung and LG. But Samsung really taking it seriously. They've now got a US R&D lab where they do a lot of their audio work, and I have to say, I mean, I've got my first Samsung soundbar in, and I've been really impressed with the sound quality. Yeah,
they've taken some serious leaps and bounds in terms of audio performance. I mean, it's part of their corporate strategy. They've made a very real effort to enhance the audio performance, not just of their TVs, but also of all their audio products, like you say, their soundbars. They've got this R&D lab in California, and I think they've been delivering good quality, nice sounding, and quite attractively priced soundbars for a while now. But I think this year they've really stepped up to the plate in terms of audio performance, and they've tried to deliver a soundbar that you can genuinely listen to music on. And I genuinely, I had the 6500, which is a slightly curved version, and you've got the 650, which is the straight flat normal shape version. And I was genuinely impressed by the performance of that soundbar. I thought it sounded excellent, and they continue that development and this sort of ambition they've got in the audio domain. I think it can only be positive in the long run.
What's the dangers of being so big, Mark?
Well, I mean, one of the dangers is that, they lose a certain amount of autonomy, the smaller branches, that it becomes kind of more homogenous across the brands, that kind of thing. There's also a sense that it has to remain. It depends on the kind of size of the company. Some will kind of make sure that everything has to remain profitable, and you can see kind of almost a certain amount of, I wouldn't call it asset stripping, but things can get shut down and kind of moved across branches. Or others just want to, if the idea is purely to kind of diversify a portfolio of different brands underneath them and to kind of have as many things to offer as possible, then they'll keep it going, and they won't be as bothered about the profitability of it. So they can kind of use R&D from one for the other. So, but the danger is always that you lose a certain amount of identity, particularly for a smaller brand.
Yeah, I mean, you start running into risks, and the reason I asked that question is, if you look at a company such as Volkswagen, so they, you think Volkswagen Golf, and that's it. But actually, they own Audi, they own a couple of luxury brands, they own Skoda.
Haven't they got Skoda? I was going to say, for many years, people were saying, we'll buy a Skoda because you're essentially buying a Volkswagen, but with a cheaper badge on it. Yeah,
so you've got Audi, Seat, and you've also got Bugatti in there. So the Veyron and the Chiron, they're Volkswagens. And the thing is that when you've got so many platforms like that under one umbrella, then parts start to be shared, because obviously you've got economies of scale. So the light switch in one model becomes the light switch in another, and then when that's been running a few years, like it has been with Vaj, so Skodas and Seats and Audis, a lot of the parts in those, and the Volkswagens, entertainment systems, all the rest of it, they might have slightly different plastics around them, but they're all the same parts. And that's the problem sometimes that you run into, that there's no differentiation between the products because they start using the same components.
What I would say, though, is the portfolio of companies under Harman they kind of cover different areas, don't they? So hopefully there won't be too much danger of that happening.
Yeah, there is that, Mark, and that's a good point to raise. There's a lot of different specialities within the group, and they're not just all making the same product. So yeah, that's a good point to raise. Anyway, so Harman have taken over Arcam. We'll watch that one and see what develops going forward. So we're going to go to a review. Talking audio, Steve's had a subwoofer in. Steve, we don't get many subwoofers in for review because there's not that many released over a year. You maybe get one or two new models coming out. This is a new one. It's from SVS. SVS have been around for a long time and been a big brand on the forums for many years now. So you've had the SB16-Ultra in. Just explain what that is.
Well, okay, SB16, so just to clarify, S sealed, B box, 16-inch driver, and Ultra basically relates to the fact that it's got the latest sledge amplification in it, so it's got 1,500 watts of continuous power, and it can also peak up to 5,000 watts if it needs to. This is a serious subwoofer. In fact, even though it's a sealed unit, like I say, 16-inch driver, it's pretty big for what's a sealed subwoofer, and in fact, originally he was going to go to Ed, but he cried off and said he couldn't fit it in his home cinema, in his testing room, and I ended up doing it. So I suppose for me it was a nice change to review something that wasn't a TV or an Ultra HD Blu-ray player. So yeah, it's sealed unit, 16-inch driver. It's got an 8-inch voice coil situated, positioned centrally behind the driver itself, and obviously SVS have been trying to make the ultimate sealed sub, and I'd say they came pretty close. This is a stonking performer. I mean, basic and deliver, it goes down really, really low. And even though it is large for a sealed unit, it's obviously not that big compared to a lot of the ported stuff. I mean, if you look at there's also a PB16 Ultra, which is a ported box, 16-inch subwoofer from SVS. I mean, that's even bigger. So it is a big unit for a sealed unit, but not that big compared to some subwoofers.
But can you move it? Can you move it on your own without giving yourself a hernia?
No. Now I listed this as a con. I said it is really heavy. Now I don't mean that to be negative in the sense it impacts its performance at all, but I was just listing it as something people need to be aware of. That if you're going to buy a sub like this, it's going to take two people to move it. And you're going to need a bit of space to install it. Obviously sometimes you've got limitations on where you can position subs, although it is pretty flexible in terms of where you can put it. But yes, it weighs an absolute ton. So please bear that in mind. It's not a negative on performance terms, but it is something I think people should be aware of. This is a really, really heavy subwoofer.
Yeah, but then that comes with its plus points as well. Being heavy, having a good cabinet with no resonance in there, so the cabinet's not going to vibrate. You're not going to hit a resonant frequency where it's going to rattle and all the rest of it, because it's been properly built, it's been properly braced on the inside. And a 16-inch driver, well, the bigger the driver the better, because more air that can be moved, and if you've got proper voice coil behind it and magnets and so on, and you can make it stop quickly and you can make it go quickly, then you have the makings of what is the ultimate subwoofer. Really, that's what you want. You want something that's not going to distort, that's not going to walk across the living room, which the smaller sealed units have a tendency to do that if they're not properly weighted. because they are powerful and they can be powerful, but at the same time there's not enough weight to keep them on the floor, and we've heard numerous stories of subwoofers walking across living room floors. So yeah, I mean there's a lot of really good science in there. There's a lot of, now in the age of computer modelling and all the rest of it, you're now getting to the stage where you're getting tiny incremental improvements nowadays. I think we've reached a point now where you can get like this SVS, and it's not cheap. It's over $2,000, isn't it, Steve? But
$2.5 grand. Yeah,
$2.5 grand. But what you're paying for there is you're paying for that weight. You're paying for a well-built cabinet. You're paying for a really good amplification and a really good driver, which is the main thing that you'd really need to have to move the air to. So the smaller subs, they're all great, but to actually move enough air to get to those really sub bass frequencies, there's nothing can compare really to the size of the driver that you're using and the power behind it.
Yeah, and what SVS have tried to do is get the best of both worlds here. So they've got the big heavy enclosure, so it's double walled construction, MDF construction. So you've got that solid isolated cabinet. You've got the weight to keep it in place. You've got a big 16-inch driver, but you've also got, it's a sealed unit, so you've got that response, and it's nice and fast in terms of its response when you're watching movies or listening to music. So you've got a responsive fast sub, but with really deep bass in there. I mean, it can go down as low as, maybe you probably find some ported ones that can go a little bit lower, but you're not gonna find a sealed unit that can go as low as this. Yeah,
but the problem with ports as well is though that you start to introduce other problems.
Other problems, yeah.
So yeah, I would always, if it was a personal choice, I would always go with as large a sealed unit as I could. In performance terms, that personally, that's what I would go with, having used so many subs over the years and so on. So yeah, it sounds like a great product.
It's got a nice little feature too. I should just mention that you can control it via app on your phone.
Yeah.
So when you look at,
I read that.
Yeah, well, on the rear, normally you'd see like little controls for things like bypass and phase and all these kind of things, volume, etc. There's none of that on the back. All there are some connections like an XLR input and an RCA input and a power button. But because all that's done from you can either do it from a little control panel on the front. There's a small display as well, which by the way you can turn off, I should stress. Or there's a remote control that it comes with, or you can just do it from your phone via a Bluetooth app, and works brilliantly, and you can set everything up and customize it to your heart's content. So that was a really nice little feature.
That's something that we've needed for years, really, isn't it? When it comes to, because it's always a case of you're trying to fine tune a subwoofer, having to walk across and fine tune it and then walk back to listening position. But if you could just sit in the listening position with your phone app and do all that in real time as you're trying to fine tune it to the room, and then looking at your plots and all the rest of it, that sounds like an excellent little feature. So yeah, good stuff. If you want to read more about that, then the review is up on the site now, so go and read that. And then we're going to wrap up hardware with, lo and behold, another OLED bloody TV.
Yeah, and this is the G7 from LG now.
So it's the same. So basically, it's the same as the rest in terms of picture quality. It just looks a bit nicer.
It's been a real struggle to write this review because you're like fourth time round. You're like, sod, what can I say this time? Obviously LG did state publicly at the beginning of the year that their 2017 range were identical across the board in terms of picture performance and picture features. And I can say categorically, having now tested the B, E, G, and W, so I haven't tested the C, but the C is the same as the B anyway, just with a different stand. I can categorically state they are all identical. There are tiny variations, in terms of the panels, but that's just be expected. You're going to get panel variations, but in terms of actual performance, in terms of picture features, they're all exactly the same, which is brilliant. I mean, they are superb televisions. I mean, they deliver a fantastic XDR performance and a really great HDR performance as well. Measurements have all been lined up. The out of the box accuracy on this TV, superb. Tiny bit too much red in the grayscale, but nothing that's going to be really visible. So again, we're seeing a good out-of-the-box performance. Obviously, it's got a full set of calibration controls, and you can get it pretty much perfect if you want to. HDR performance, again, measurement-wise, very, very good. 98% of DCI-P3, 670 nits of peak brightness, up to about 1,000 if you go down to a very small window. Again, that precision from an OLED TV. Got Dolby Vision support, of course. New Dolby Vision calibration process as well, which is part of the new Harman 2017 workflow, which works really well because what you do is you basically measure, calibrate, remeasure. It loads the settings onto you put onto a USB thumb drive, pop that into the TV. The TV then can load those settings back in and adjust itself. So you get that's how you calibrate now for Dolby Vision, which I think is a much better approach than previous generations where it was involving this golden reference file that never seemed to be available.
So basically, what you're doing is you're updating the 3D loop inside there.
Yes, yeah? Exactly. Okay. In the TV, based upon an absolute measurements against Dolby Vision standards. So it's very clever, and it does work. Because I have tried it out. So that's an interesting new addition. But overall, the problem with the G7 is quite simply, I'm not quite sure where its position is, why it exists. Because if you look at the lineup, and that they've got technically 5 different TVs in their OLED range 2017. You've got the B or the C, which are basically your entry level, nice design, all the same picture features, as I said, same picture quality, but sort of just normal speakers in the base as you'd find with a slim OLED TV. Then you've got the E7, which has the picture on glass construction, which is much more robust and very attractive, and it's also got a built-in soundbar, so you get better audio performance. And then you've got the W7, which is the wallpaper TV that you literally stick on the wall with magnets, and is incredibly thin. It comes with its own separate unit for audio and for the connections and all that sort of stuff. And then there's the G7, which is really just the same as the E7 with a slightly bigger soundbar, built-in soundbar. So you kind of wonder why you would buy the G7, because it's $7,000 when you could get basically the same for $2,000 less if you buy the E7. If you're gonna,
or for a little more, you can have the double W7 if you're spending.
Or
$7,000.
You go W7 for a little bit more, and get the nice sound unit and everything like that. Or you can get a B or a C and save yourself, $3,000 more, and then use that to buy an amazing sound system if you wanted to. So it does seem like it's performance-wise, I can't fault it. Why it actually exists, I'm not so sure.
Do you think it's purely the idea of they need something kind of that interim price point between the E and the W, so it's not such a kind of chasm between the two?
Probably. Yeah, I think a lot of it's choice as well. I mean, if you asked LG, I think their answer would be, we want to give consumers choice and give them options. That's probably the reply you would get on that one.
Yeah, they want to be able to say, we've got look at our range of TVs this year. We go from the introductory level BC right up to the W, and we've got the G and the Signature, which is part of their signature range of luxury products. But I think from the point of view of an enthusiast looking to buy a TV, if you're looking, it would be very difficult to justify buying the G7 when you could just as easily buy the E7 and get exactly the same picture quality and save yourself £2,200. That's the reality. Or, as you say, Phil, if you want to spend that kind of dough, go a little bit more and get the W and have your wallpaper thing.
Yeah, because I mean that then becomes a talking point, doesn't it? It becomes a focal point in the living room, something like that. I mean, it is a beautiful piece of engineering when you see it. You just think how thin that screen is and how flexible it is as well. When you get the engineers to take it off the wall and move it around, it was amazing how flexible it was, yet you didn't end up getting any dead pixels or anything like that from moving it around like that. So there's a lot of engineering going into that product. So if you're going to spend big bucks, and I would go the W7. I would bypass the G totally. So I get what you're saying. It seems to be a product without any sort of reason to exist, really, other than to bolster up
without portfolio.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was trying to remember the saying in my head there, and I couldn't quite remember it. But yeah, totally. Right, so that's the G7 OLED TV. So that's covered all of LG's range now, and basically we've covered all the available OLED TVs. So all those reviews are now up on AVForums. So I guess are we going to run a little competition of spot the difference between all the different reviews?
That's just cruel.
You have my sympathy, Steve, writing about the LG lineup, because they're all quality stuff, but there's not a lot of difference between them. So that wraps up hardware for this week. We're going to move on to movie news next. Okay, so moving on to movie news, and I've only seen the one film in July so far, so I'm going to have to get a move on. But a lot of this has been because of opening times, Steve, and when films open and so on. And we really wanted to discuss Dunkirk in this review, and unfortunately we can't do that because it doesn't open till today while we're recording. And I'm certainly not going to be able to see that till at least Monday. So there's a few films I want to see, and I just haven't had time to get out because of the strange release schedules at the minute.
Yeah, I'm quite liking this recent trend for early releases of sort of Tuesday, Wednesday night, kicking off to try and increase the opening weekend box office. Obviously, Dunkirk feels it's confident enough that it can open on a Friday, so we won't be able to talk about this until next week. But yeah, this on midweek openings has been really handy for us because it means we can go and see the film and talk about it on the podcast on the Friday recording. So yeah, Dunkirk opens today as of the day we're recording. We'll talk about it next week. In terms of what's opening this week, as in terms of when the podcast goes up on Monday, on the Friday you've got Captain Underpants. I think everything you need to know about that film is in the title. An animated children's adventure about superheroes.
Is it the school holidays or something?
Yes, funnily enough. In case you hadn't realised, and I'm sure Mark could testify to this, kids are off. So the first of a number of animated films coming out over the summer, obviously. But the first of them, well, last week we had Cars 3, which kicked things off a bit. Now, Captain Underpants, superhero adventure with a superhero who's obviously in his underpants, which actually looks quite comical in the trailers, but clearly is aimed at the kiddies. For those of us who are older than 10, the big release this week is The Big Sick, which may not sound like an appealing title, but it's actually, I haven't seen it yet, but I've read quite a few reviews and it's been getting really, really good reviews. It's basically a romantic comedy where I can't remember his name off the top of my head, he's an American Indian comic and actor. And he's written a film about how he actually met his wife. So he met his wife, she's from a white American family. He's, I think, maybe from Pakistan originally, moved to America, grew up there. And so there's a culture clash there, but also she went into a coma, and so you had to deal with that as well. So it might not sound like material for a romantic comedy, but the clips I've seen have been really funny. And I've got to say, it's produced by Jed Apatow, who's obviously made a lot of romantic comedies and other comedies as well. And it does look like a really interesting film, an interesting subject, taken from the idea of having a Muslim leading man in an American movie these days is pretty rare. So it's got an interesting take. It does look really funny in the trailers and the clips that I've seen, and it certainly is an interesting idea that I actually want to see this film, so I will go and see it when it opens at the end of the week.
Okay, good stuff. So that's stuff opening. Blu-ray wise, there's at least one big one, yeah.
Yeah, we got in terms of the big release of the week, Kong Skull Island arrives on both Blu-ray and Ultra HD Blu-ray. Saw this at the cinema. Did you see it at the cinema, Phil?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, and I've got to say I quite enjoyed it. Yes, it's nonsense, but it was enjoyable nonsense.
Absolute nonsense, but it was just one of them popcorn films that doesn't overstay its welcome, has a bit of character about it, and walks around with its tongue firmly in its cheek the whole time. It's really good.
Yeah, I was going to say, I also remember when I saw it at the cinema, thinking it looked really nice. A really nice look to it, didn't it? It was deliberately taking a leaf out of Apocalypse Now's book in terms of sort of 70s Vietnam vibe. But it was a very attractive film.
There was a lot of that humour in there as well, though, about Nam and the soldiers and the army and following orders and all that kind of thing. So yeah, it was entertaining. I got to say, really entertaining. And just don't expect anything that's going to make you think. Yeah.
But I'm hopeful on Ultra HD Blu-ray particularly it will look really impressive. Certainly I remember it having quite a rich colour palette, so that would be hopeful. I think it was a 2K DI, but even so I think it should still look pretty cool in wide colour gamut and HDR. So that's the big release of the week. Also out, we've got Get Out, which was a massive hit, surprise hit, sleeper hit. It's a horror film with racial undertones, but I don't want to say too much about it. But it sounds really interesting. It's had really good reviews. It was a big hit in the States, and it was a big hit here too. And it's basically about a young black man who's girlfriend's white, he goes to visit her family, I think they're down in the south, and then terrible things start to happen. But apparently it's really, really good, and I'm very keen to check this out myself, so I'll probably end up buying it. Not getting an Ultra HD Blu-ray release, I think, in this country, but it is getting one in the States, so might wait till it comes out in the States and get it there. But that's a film that I'm definitely interested in. It's had very good reviews, I say, a very interesting take on the horror genre with a sort of racial undertone to it.
This seems to be not only release date, Steve, but there seems to be a few films that are not lined up for UK releases at the minute.
There's something really weird. I don't know what's going on at the moment. I can't explain it, but there's been a very distressing trend as far as not just, first of all, Ultra HD Blu-ray releases. There seems to be a lot more coming out in the States than there are here. So, for example, Life, for example, that's had an Ultra HD Blu-ray release in the States, but hasn't had one here yet. They're either coming out much later or not at all, which is annoying. But also, just generally, as far as release schedules go, for example, Fast and the Furious 8, which is already out in America. And so it came out in the UK and the US exactly the same day at cinema. It's already out on Ultra HD Blu-ray and Blu-ray in the States, but it's not coming out on either format in this country till October, which makes no sense to me at all. But you're right, Phil. There's a weird trend of either stuff not coming out on Ultra HD Blu-ray in this country, coming out much later, or just generally discs coming out much later, which I think for those of us who still collect Blu-rays is a bit annoying. But it might generate more interest in people buying stuff in the States again because they can get it so much quicker.
Yeah, and the other one is Pirates of the Caribbean, because it had a different title in the States to the UK, because it was called it was called Dead Men Tell No Tales, isn't it, in the US?
Dead Men Tell No Tales in the US, yeah.
And in this country it was Salazar's Revenge or something.
Salazar's Revenge,
yeah. So yeah, there was a bit of news about that as well. So a Disney release. But they're not releasing it in the UK. There's no planned release in the UK, but it will be released in the US.
Yeah, so. It's been announced as their second Ultra HD Blu-ray release as well. I assume it will get a release. It's just going to take a bit longer. It's very weird. There seems to be, conversely though, interestingly, you mentioned about differences in release schedules and what's coming out. Interestingly, there was announced this week Terminator 2, because it's getting a 3D reissue at the cinema. It's been converted into 3D by James Cameron. It's getting a brief reissue at the cinema.
Oh, he's not still banging on about 3D, is he?
Yeah. But the funny thing is that it's not being released in 3D in the States, but it is in the UK. So they obviously feel there's still a market in this country, but not in America. But yes, there's been some strange stuff going on as far as release schedules go, and not just timings, but also titles and when they come out and whether they come out at all. And particularly with Ultra HD Blu-ray, there's definitely been a lot more stuff in the States.
At least the saving grace is that with UHD Blu-ray, there is no region coding. So
yes.
if you're not interested in having the Blu-ray version playable, because a lot of them are locked to region A, if you're not that bothered about the Blu-ray in the box, you can obviously import this stuff and it will play on UHD players.
Yeah, so there's no issue there. And you can get some, yes, it can be a bit pricey, but quite often you can get some quite good deals too if you shop around. And some of the catalogue titles are actually quite cheap, relatively speaking. So, in terms of other releases this week, we've got Lost City of Z, which is a true story of a Victorian adventurer in his obsession with finding a lost city in the Amazon jungle that would prove the existence of a sophisticated race that existed before we knew about them, which I haven't seen, but I've read Kaz's review and sounds really interesting, and apparently it's a really good film with great performances from the leads, from Charlie Hunnam and Sienna Miller and Robert Pattinson. And apparently it also looks really good too, really, really nicely shot in the jungle and with a shot on film. And apparently it's a great disc. So looking forward to that. Origin Wars is a Aussie film, sci-fi movie that I know absolutely nothing about. I hadn't heard of it before, but that comes out this week as well. And we've also got the latest Criterion release, which is Stalker, a Russian movie made by the guy that made Solaris, and that apparently looks absolutely stunning. They've done a lovely job of restoring the original 35mm negative, and apparently it's a very nice looking disc. And if you're a fan of that particular director and his genre and this film, then it's worth checking out.
Is there any other UHD news, or have we covered that now?
There is a lot, actually. Been some quite big announcements this week. So we mentioned T2, which got announced. I think it's coming out in the US on the 3rd of October. I suspect it'll be around about the same time here, but then again, maybe not. It is showing us December on Amazon at the moment, but I don't know if that's accurate. It says December the 31st. I think that's just a holding date they put in. They don't have the exact date.
I think this is the film I bought on the most different formats.
Yeah, me too.
I had it on VHS, Laserdisc, DVD, Blu-ray, and numerous versions. Not just once or twice, but all the different versions, all the different Skynet versions, and this and that, and the T2 Laserdisc, that was gorgeous. I absolutely loved that box set.
Laserdisc. Yeah. I've still got it. I kept that. Couldn't part with that one. Yeah, I'm going to buy it on both Ultra HD Blu-ray and a 3D Blu-ray release. I have to. It's just to keep the tradition going.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Is it going to be finished in 4K though, or is it a 2K DI?
Good question, because it was shot on 35mm, so there's no reason why it couldn't have been a 4K restoration. I don't know the details yet on that. I'm guessing though that if they did it for a for this 3D conversion, that Cameron would have done it at the highest resolution he could. Knowing Cameron as he is, he's a bit like us. He's a total AV geek. I'm sure he'll do the best job possible. But I'm gonna get both the Ultra HD Blu-ray release and the 3D Blu-ray release just to complete my T2 collection. Also coming out on 12th of September in the States, at least, and I think it's the same time in this country. E.T. is getting its Ultra HD Blu-ray release, which I can't wait for.
Yeah.
3rd of October in the States. Again, I'm not positive on UK dates here, but certainly the 3rd of October. Bridge on the River Kwai is coming out on Ultra HD Blu-ray. Now that was shot on 70mm, so this is going to look stunning. That's going to definitely buy that. And also a personal favourite of mine, 17th of October, again in the States, Starship Troopers, one of my favourite Verhoeven movies. It's getting an Ultra HD. I love that film. Absolutely love that film. So I watched it on Blu-ray recently, actually, and I think the effects hold up quite well. So I'll be very curious to see how it does on Ultra HD Blu-ray. And interesting, these aren't actually Ultra HD Blu-ray releases, but they've had 4K restorations recently, and they're coming out on Blu-ray in October again in the States and in the UK. Actually, The Thing, this is an Arrow release in this country. So there was a release last year of The Thing in the States. This is a new 4K restoration of The Thing. Loads of extras. Looks like a really good package. If you're a fan of The Thing, definitely want to get that. That's coming out in October on Arrow in this country. And then Criterion, so presumably they'll do it in both this country and the US. They've got a new 4K restoration of Barry Lyndon, and they're bringing that out on Blu-ray in October as well. So if you're a Kubrick fan, that's definitely worth it, because Barry Lyndon's a gorgeous film.
Why don't they just release it on 4K Ultra HD?
Don't know. I guess these are smaller studios, Arrow and Criterion, that they haven't been involved yet in the Ultra HD Blu-ray. Perhaps it's a budgetary thing. I don't know.
All right, I thought Close Encounters was coming.
It is coming, but it hasn't been officially announced yet. It's definitely coming this year to tie in with its 4th anniversary, but there hasn't been an official announcement from Sony yet in terms of what's going to be on the disc or when it's coming out. Hopefully, though, it'll be the 3 different versions with seamless branching, like they did with the Blu-ray release.
Yeah, it's now getting to the point where these are titles that I'll just go and buy anyway.
We'll buy, yeah.
Yeah, and The Fifth Element, it came out recently as well, so I'll go and get that as well. And
I was actually, funny enough, last night I was watching that. I've got my original Fifth Element Blu-ray, the Blu-ray that came out, which is also included with the Ultra HD Blu-ray that came out last year with the Atmos soundtrack, and the Ultra HD Blu-ray, and I was comparing all 3, and the difference is quite. I mean, because you compare the original Blu-ray release to the one that came out last year, that's already a massive improvement in terms of image quality. Then you put on the Ultra HD Blu-ray release, and particularly some of the just shots of people and that sort of stuff, where it's just off the 35mm negative, the level of detail is staggering. It's absolutely amazing. So definitely get that.
Didn't I say something about Paramount getting behind Dolby Vision?
Did you? I didn't see that. I mean, they've been using Paramount, Disney, and Universal and Warner's all use Dolby Vision on when their films are available on various streaming services in the States. People, things like Vudu, that sort of stuff.
No, this is for Blu-ray disc. This is for
right. Well, I was going to say, so far only Universal and Lionsgate have announced, and Sony have announced discs. So I was expecting Paramount and Warner's at some point. The interesting thing about Disney is that everyone assumed they were waiting for Dolby Vision to reach a point of critical mass before joining the UHD market. But apparently, Guardians of the Galaxy and Pirates of the Caribbean only use HDR10. There's no Dolby Vision on them, so that was a bit of a surprise because everyone assumed that was going to be the case. But no, apparently not. Obviously, those are only their first 2 releases. We might see them adding it later.
Yeah, I think that'll be the case.
Let's not read too much into it just yet.
Yeah, which is what I told you the other day,
yes,
when you were almost crying
Ranting and raving.
Right, okay, so that's the UHD Blu-rays. Other big news over the it was actually at Wimbledon final, wasn't it, that it was announced that the new Doctor Who is going to be female, and of course, as predicted, Twitter and the internet exploded a couple of seconds after that was revealed, and some really silly sexist and misogynist stuff being said online. What is the problem with having a female Doctor? I think it's a logical next step, and a lot of people say, no, it's never happened in sci-fi before. Excuse me, Captain Janeway, that was 20 years ago, people. We've had strong females in sci-fi for a long time. I think sci-fi is one of those genres that has always had strong females. I mean, just look at Alien and Sigourney Weaver, and there's loads of examples.
Fifth Element.
Yeah, fifth. Why? I just didn't understand why it went like that. It was a logical step, wasn't it, Steve? I mean, you follow Doctor Who. I mean, I lost touch with it years ago. I really couldn't stand the writing. It just annoyed me. But you've stuck with it. It's a logical step, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, there's no reason. I mean, they'd already established that Time Lords, I know they're called Time Lords, not Time Ladies, but I think that's just a general reference for the whole, their species. Time Lords can regenerate from men into women. They've shown it already with the Master. The Master regenerated into the Mistress. They'd established it. Therefore, it was only a matter of time before they did it with Doctor Who, herself. And also, the Doctor is there's no gender attached to that, is there? So the name itself doesn't have to be male or female, could be either. So I think it was inevitable. So I wasn't at all surprised that they've done it this time. I think it's a good move. I think it's an interesting idea. I think it'll give a new dynamic to the series because they've been doing male Doctors now for over 50 years. I think a change is going to be really good. I think it'll bring in new fans. Young girls perhaps will find it more interesting, having a female lead instead of a male lead. Obviously, it'll mean that they can have male assistant. The Doctor's assistants have been largely female up till now. That can now be turned around to male assistants and give a different dynamic to it. So I think it's interesting. I think it's exciting. I think that I was getting a little bit tired and bored of Doctor Who on the last. I mean, even though Capaldi is very good, I was getting annoyed with, like you were saying, with Moffat's writing, and also just it seemed to be a bit stale. The idea of having a female lead and a new showrunner who apparently is going to be bringing other things in as well, not just having a female Doctor, but also other ideas. Maybe having a single story across the entire series, a single story arc would be a good idea. So, something new. It needs a bit of a shake-up, and this is definitely a good start. And I don't know much about Jodie Whittaker. I haven't seen anything she's really been in apart from Attack the Block. But she looks to be androgynous as well, so hopefully she can bring a nice alien spin to the character. And
Attack the Block. You had Finn and Doctor Who now.
Yeah, Doctor Who and
fighting aliens
in the same film. I'm excited about it. I think I'm looking forward to seeing her appearance at the end of the Christmas episode when Capaldi regenerates into
the what episode?
Christmas. Did I say? What did I say?
I don't know, but it wasn't a Christmas.
The Christmas episode.
Same as when you say THX.
Thex.
Right, so that's a new Doctor Who. What do we think, Mr. Botwright?
I think it's a good idea. I mean, I think there's always going to be this kind of knee-jerk reaction. People either dislike the decision, or I think it's the suspicion there's this kind of pushback against any assumed kind of pandering to what people see as political correctness, or that kind of thing. So there's a kind of an inbuilt reaction to want to kind of poo-poo the situation. But no, I think it needs a bit of fresh blood. It needs to kind of change its formula. I'll be honest, I haven't really got into the modern Doctor Who's. It's partly due to the writing style, but it's more the fact that I think it's my idea of the Doctor was kind of solidified during childhood, and it's the same with I think most people whoever you grew up.
Isn't it, Mark?
Well, that's it. That's it. I think it's a lot of people forget that it's for 10-year-olds.
Wasn't that a Daily Mash headline?
Very
for kids.
That's not necessarily a bad thing, though, is it? There are lots of kind of great things that are for kids. I'm looking forward to watching Captain Underpants. I'll be honest. No, it's quality, but no, I kind of grew up in the Sylvester McCoy era, and everyone else seems to really hate that Doctor. So I think it'll be interesting just to see, people who grew up with this one, and it's some people are so invested in the idea of the character that they never want them to change in any particular way, which I can kind of understand. I mean, with certain things, but when it comes to someone who actually does regenerate, it just seems like that's not the hill you want to choose to die on, I think.
Is anyone out of all of you who would you consider the quintessential Doctor Who?
Tom Baker.
Right,
Sylvester McCoy.
Now, I'm old enough to remember when John Pertwee became Tom Baker in Doctor Who, and there was actually at the time, because my doctor at that point, in my life, I'd only known John Pertwee in the role. I was very anti, and not just me. I think there was a lot of anti Tom Baker at the time when he first became Doctor Who, because he wasn't John Pertwee, and obviously over time he became not just the longest serving Doctor, because I think he did over 7 years, but also to most people now he's the quintessential Doctor Who, and to me too, even though I was resistant when he first became Doctor Who. So it just goes to show there can be resistance at the time. Quite often, what people didn't want ends up becoming the best. So
just wait until we get a Black Bond, then you'll see the internet go down as a whole.
The internet will explode.
But I mean, the only thing that really could be finger pointed is that there is a trend at the moment, and I'm not saying it's a bad trend, but there is a trend at the moment. If you look at major franchises, especially sci-fi franchises, they really have gone for the strong female role model. So Star Wars is a perfect example of that. So you could see where some of the cynicism was coming from people saying, yeah, another strong female lead. But like you say, Steve, I think it's the right thing at the right time, just to give it a bit of a rebirth. And from what I understand, I think the script writing team has changed as well, haven't they?
Yeah, this completely. Chris Cornbold, I think his name is, the new showrunner, the guy that created and ran Broadchurch on ITV. He's a new showrunner, so it's nothing to do with Moffat anymore. After the Christmas special, it'll be a new showrunner, a completely new team. And like I say, apparently he's come in with lots of, I don't know what they are yet, but he pitched it to the BBC, his ideas, and they really like them. And so the idea is he shakes it up, changes things quite a bit, not just in terms of the lead actor, but also I think in other aspects as well. And I think that's good, because like I say, it was becoming a bit samey, a bit stale. Even though I think Capaldi's excellent in the role, I was getting a little bit bored with it. So I think this is all good.
Good stuff. Get paid as much as Capaldi, with it being the BBC.
Actually, there was a news story yesterday saying that she's on the same money. So yeah, well, they couldn't do anything else, could they? Really, now that it's public. So yeah, that's interesting, and I'll certainly tune in to see what it's like, see what this new team's like, and it might actually be me getting back into that, because I don't think I haven't really spent that much time watching Doctor Who since the days of Chris Eccleston. I watched that with Rose. I thought they were a great team, but it started to get it started to think it was getting too clever for its own good, if you know what I mean. The script writing and the storytelling, and they were trying to be too clever, and that's where I started to tune out at that point. So I haven't watched it since. I haven't seen any Capaldi.
I tell you what, I'd like to see them do Doctor Who, because he's meant to be a time traveller, but they very, very rarely use time travel as a serious plot point. I'd like to see something like Back to the Future Part 2, where they're running around backwards and forwards in time, and you're seeing stuff happening from different perspectives, or you see them in the background from another scene.
They'd up the budget for that, though, wouldn't they?
They would have to up the budget a bit, but I'd love to see them actually use time travel a bit more, in a more imaginative way than they currently do. Like, you go back to Roman Britain. Okay, fine, but let's do something. They did it once in I think it was the first season that Moffat was show running with Matt Smith. There was a couple of cool little time travel bits in that. But it hasn't been used much, and given that he's primarily meant to be a time traveller,
I think the problem
I'd like to see more of that in the show.
The problem is if you give anyone the power over time travel, it kind of limits the amount of drama. I think so they have to kind of almost put that away. It's a little bit like in kind of horror films and thrillers and stuff like that. They always have to have a plot point as to why mobile phones don't work. So you have to try, if he could just say, oh no, it's terrible, the world's going, I'll just go back 5 minutes and change it. It would be a very short show.
It's funny that you raised that about the mobile phones, because that was that was a criticism on the latest Honest trailers, which is Memento.
Yeah.
Which is a brilliant film, but actually you couldn't make that film now because you've got mobile phones, you got other things like video on your mobile and all the rest of it. So a lot of the key plot points and how he got how he got confused and ended up at the point he did wouldn't make sense nowadays if that film was made now.
They also raised a really, really valid point, which hadn't occurred to me until they mentioned it, but then I thought, like, God, that is a really good point. That doesn't make any sense at all, which is that if he doesn't remember anything after his accident, how come he remembers that he doesn't remember anything?
Yeah, exactly.
He wouldn't know that, would he? He wouldn't know he had a condition because he'd always forget each day or whatever, 15 minutes. Whatever.
What, he'd just be like a goldfish walking from one room to the other.
Yep.
Well, yeah, basically.
Yep.
Yeah, very good. Quite funny. And doing it in reverse was quite funny too in the trailer. Like the film structure, they did the trailer the same way.
Yeah, it's entertaining.
Very clever.
Go and watch Honest Trailers. If we haven't got you hooked on Honest Trailers yet, we're not doing our job properly. Yeah. Right, so we're going to wrap up on some Star Wars news this week because we're quite frankly over time, and I don't think we'd get there without Ed, being Ed. So Lucasfilm released a behind-the-scenes video from Last Jedi set, and I was really looking forward to this, Steve. And I've got to say, well, I was intrigued to see what I saw within that, and I'm not going to spoil it for people who don't want spoilers and that kind of thing. We're not going to get into any of this. I was underwhelmed. And,
yeah, me too.
and for a Star Wars fan that I am, and it got me thinking, and I'm just thinking, well, when was the last time I watched, or how many times have I watched Rogue One? I bought the Blu-ray and I've watched it once, which really surprised me because as a Star Wars nut, you watch it 6 or 7 times. And then I thought, well, what about Force Awakens? I've only watched that twice on disc. I went to the cinema to see it twice, as I did Rogue One, but at home I haven't watched it as much as I would. I'd probably go and put Empire on rather than putting Force Awakens on it. And so what is that telling me?
That it wasn't that good, or that you're just suffering from overexposure to Star Wars at this point, and you've reached saturation point.
I think that's a lot of that. I mean, the thing for me in Rogue One, it was good, but there was lots of issues with it as well. And the only thing that really sort of got me going, and when you think about it, kind of the Force Awakens was a bit the same. There was moments in there that played to the audience, and I'm talking about Vader at the end, and that made you leave on a high. And also within the Force Awakens, I'm not going to spoil it for people, but there is a huge moment in that film which overtakes everything else. So you leave the cinema in a certain way, or you leave the film in a certain way, and to me, there's not a lot of substance there now. Now that I've watched them, and people are going to be saying, "We've been saying this for years, Phil. There's no substance. It's a Star Wars film." But actually, even for a Star Wars film, I'm struggling to really get an interest, Steve, because with other films, I knew all the characters' names, even the bit characters. I was interested in them and all the rest of it. Maybe it's just the fact that I'm 43-year-old and maybe Star Wars out.
Yeah, no, I have to say, like you, I was underwhelmed, and I don't feel the same sense of excitement about seeing episode. I mean, I'll go and see it, obviously, in December, but I'm not sitting here counting the days thinking, oh, I can't wait. I'm more excited, actually, about getting hold of the 3rd season of Rebels at the end of August than I am at the moment about seeing episode 8. I think part of my problem is that there's saturation of Star Wars related stuff is getting a bit annoying, because not only have we got this film coming out in December, we've got the Han Solo movie coming out in May of next year, so we've got two films in less than a year coming out already. But the Star Wars is everywhere. I mean, Disney are absolutely milking this cash cow to every last drop it possibly can. I'm getting a little bit sick of the oversaturation of Star Wars across all media. Never mind just the movies. But also, I'm kind of the whole thing with the sacking the directors of the Han Solo movie just makes me think, like, there's the group of people who are basically controlling everything, and they don't want it to be original or different. They just want to keep churning out the same stuff to keep making more and more money for this cash machine. And that whole behind-the-scenes video was basically a big circle jerk, wasn't it? To say, oh, how great Rian Johnson is and how he's doing his own thing and writing and directing. As if to say, look, we are letting somebody do what they want to do.
Exactly. That was the vibe I was getting from it. I was thinking, hang on, this is really stage managed, or like overly stage managed, because all these things are. But this is like too much of a, isn't this guy great? Look at how much control he's got over this and all the rest of it. And yeah, it was just PR waffle, basically. And even some of the stuff, like there was some creatures shown and that kind of thing, and I was like, meh. There's some kind of casino world or whatever. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah. I think it probably is just saturation, a combination of oversaturation and growing up and having, the time to devote. Do you know what I mean, though? When you were a kid, though, you can devote a lot of time to collecting figures and learning all the characters' names, learning all the ins and outs and all the rest of it. But I don't know about you, but I just haven't got time in my life to be thinking about one movie so much, or at least a franchise of movies so much. It's just too much going on.
But is it the same for kids nowadays than it was for us? Because, I mean, yes,
that's all I had.
Exactly, that's what I mean. There wasn't much more than Star Wars and BMX for me when I was growing up. That was, and then American football a little bit later on. I got into that, and we didn't have the internet, we didn't have other distractions and so on. So, is it the same? And is this why I'm not interested in it? Because it's being made for another generation where they're not, the storytelling is not quite the same, and a lot it's either playing to what the fans expect or playing it really, really safe and playing it for an audience whose attention span isn't that great.
I think it's a mixture of both. I think if you wanted to be very cynical, you would say the move towards a kind of strong young female kind of plays into, like with the Hunger Games or like with kind of Twilight Saga or that kind of thing. It's a big market now, and then they throw in enough of the kind of iconography of the originals to get people excited. So like in the trailer, the moment that most people kind of squealed like a girl was when they saw the Millennium Falcon. So I think there's a mixture that they're kind of playing it safe. They've definitely got a kind of checklist of things that they want out of the series now. But yeah, I think it's just a case now where you will enjoy them more if you just pay absolutely no attention, and then the movie drops, and then you'll probably end up enjoying even the Han Solo movie. You'll probably end up enjoying it. But the problem is, the more you see of it beforehand, the more you start to kind of overthink it, and the more you start to kind of analyze it excessively before you've even seen it. So you're going in with these preconceptions. If it's just as it should be, just let the movie drop. And in the old days, without that kind of connection to the internet, it was a case of maybe you'd get a magazine or something and you'd see a picture and you'd pore over that.
Saturday morning TV. I remember early 80s Saturday morning TV. That was the only place you got anything on Star Wars or the films coming out. And I remember Empire, and I remember Return of the Jedi. Saturday morning TV. It was. That was the big thing. That was
where I first saw a clip of Star Wars on Saturday morning TV.
Exactly.
It was the TIE Fighter sequence when they're escaping from the Death Star, and I remember seeing that, and I had no idea what it was, but I just remember seeing, I don't know what that is, but I have to see it.
But do you remember
like the best thing ever?
But that was the sense of, you saw it and then it was gone.
Exactly.
It was purely in your imagination from that moment onwards. You couldn't click replay on a YouTube trailer or anything like that. It was just gone, and it was they got you. That was the hook. Now they've got to be very careful in the sense that everything on the internet has to be dealing with the fact that it's fighting against multiple other things vying for your attention. So it's got to try and grab you, but none of it really is made to be rewatched. None of it's made to be paid attention to that extent anymore.
Exactly, which is kind of the point I was hopefully trying to get across there was the day, the age that we're in now, and the fact that you can go into YouTube and watch the trailer 10 million times. It kind of kills the vibe, I think, and we're also in an internet age where people want everything yesterday. I mean,
bring back the good old days when football transfer news was on CFAX, and pornography was something you found in hedges.
And there's the byline.
Thank you for that quote, Mark. You just saved us, because I was thinking, what the hell are we going to quote for this one?
Right, and on that bombshell, that is it for this week's AVForums podcast. Thank you very much to Steve Withers.
I refuse to drive in this country too many madmen.
Mark Hodgkinson.
It's a guaranteed blockbuster.
And Mark Botwright.
Isn't he dead?
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and videos, and of course leave us 5-star ratings on iTunes, but only if you enjoyed the show. I'm Phil Hinton, thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.